for the very kind introduction, Jason. To kind of hammer Jason's point, a lot of times when you attend these meetings and work groups break out, and then there might be stuff that be interest to us both in the work group and in the main room, the plenary. And if there's just one of us, we have to choose where to go. So if other folks are interested, please let us know. But like Jason mentioned, it is a fair amount of work. There's a fair amount of work in preparation, and the meetings can be painfully boring at times. But it does not mean it's unimportant. While it's painfully boring, it is often really important stuff. What I sometimes say to people when I talk about this work is, I think the work that most of you do, that is visiting seafarers on ships, that is the heart and soul of organization for sure. For me, the closer I get to do that is when I help an individual seafarer. When this individual seafarer grieved in some fashion, he was not paid his wages, not repatriated, being harassed, and I'm able to advocate on behalf of that seafarer and get them some relief, that really speaks to my soul, and I love that type of work. But I recognize that when I have an impact at the IMO or ILO and have some type of guideline, policy, regulation, etc., change in a way that makes the life of seafarers better, I've impacted millions of seafarers for decades to come. So while it might be boring and painful during the time, and might not always have the immediate reward of helping individual seafarer, the impact can be dramatic large. So again, if anybody's interested in doing something boring and painful, but please let us know, and we'd certainly be happy to entertain that, assuming your size will support it. It is at your own expenses typically, so traveling to the ILO in Geneva or the IMO in London is typically your own expenses. So just a few more details about myself. I am a Seamen Church Institute employee, but I am a resource for you and for your port visitors too, or your ship visitors. So please, if you don't have my contact information, get it from me today. I have to give you a card, but if your chaplains are visiting a ship and the seafarers have legal questions, you can connect them directly to me. I'd be happy to engage with them. In addition, if your chaplains have legal questions about a scenario they're encountering, I'm happy to engage with them. So Seamen Church Institute pays me to do that, not just help the chaplains at Seamen Church Institute. I certainly do that, but all of your chaplains and the seafarers you interact with, I'm here to help you there too. So please, if you don't have my contact information, get it. I'd be happy to assist you on that. So briefly, what Jason asked me to do in about 10 minutes, and I'll try and stick with that, is talk about what your delegation is doing at the IMO and the ILO. And obviously our focus is on those committees that are focused on seafarers issues. I mean, the IMO is having meetings every month, typically almost every week. There's some type of meeting going on at the IMO. We clearly can't be there all the time. So what we're trying to do is look at the agendas and see which ones are focused on issues most heavily impacting seafarers. I mean, the IMO is considering regulation and policy about shipping. So obviously all of them have some impact on seafarers, but since you can't be there 52 weeks out of the year, we choose those that are most impactful. And right now, the 3 committees and subcommittees at the IMO that are most heavily involved in seafarer issues is Human Elements Training and Watchkeeping Subcommittee, with the name kind of gives you away, that's focused a lot of seafarer-related issues. The Maritime Safety Committee meetings, it's the parent committee of that subcommittee. So the work that the HCW does gets reported to the Maritime Safety Committee, and the Maritime Safety Committee assigns work to the HCW, so that's no one's heavily involved with seafarer issues. And right now the legal committee, hasn't always been true, but right now the legal committee is doing a lot of seafarer related stuff. So those are 3 committees and subcommittees at the IMO we try to attend. In the past, sometimes other committees have been involved in seafarer stuff, more heavily involved, and if that changes, we can certainly start going to those committees again. And in the past, at times the legal committee was not heavily involved in seafarers. So the key is look at the agenda and make sure we're going where it can maximize the impact. Again, we all have limited resources, and it's expensive to travel and stay in London, so we try and choose those committee meetings the most impactful. At the ILO, clearly the Special Tripartite Committee, the STC that Beach mentioned, that's the meeting that considers amendments to MLC 2006. There's no doubt that MLC 2006 is the preeminent international instrument dealing with seafarers' rights, so we always try to go to that meeting. And that meets roughly every 3 years. Again, they met last in 2022. That was mostly a remote meeting for most of us, and then a meeting in person next year. We do plan to attend that meeting. And then Beach mentioned this joint tripartite working group, which is joint IMO, ILO, uses ILO rules, meaning the tripartite format where the seafarers representing ship owners representing countries all have have votes and voices, but it is joint with IMO and ILO representation. It is not a standing committee. All the others I mentioned are standing committees, meaning they should exist unless the organization decides to do away with it. The joint tripartite work group needs to be approved for a finite period of time by both organizations, and then if not extended, then it will cease to exist. So they have another meeting this November. Again, we tend to attend that because it's look at the fair treatment of seafarers accused of crimes. It's an important issue and one to look to attend as well. So those are the committees that we attend. Then some more recent activity. There was a joint tripartite work group meeting back in February, and it was focused on hazing, bullying, sexual assault, and sexual harassment in the maritime. So obviously something heavily impactful to seafarers. We did attend that meeting, had some really concrete recommendations flowing out of it. Probably the most significant was they reviewed, amended, and then ultimately approved training standards to STCW around hazing, bullying, sexual assault, sexual harassment. So the process was IMO created some kind of draft training requirements to STCW, sent it to the joint tripartite work group. They looked at it, made some more changes to it, approved that, and then sent it back to IMO. And then in May of this past year, the Maritime Safety Committee at IMO approved those training standards. So they are now approved STCW standing training standards around hazing, bullying, sexual assault, sexual harassment. Now, that doesn't mean tomorrow we eradicate this problem from maritime impact on seafarers, but it is a critical first step. In the past, the training that seafarers got varied dramatically from company to company to maybe nothing to something, but certainly not a standard. Now there are standards that are approved by the international community of how we should train these seafarers and hopefully start that paradigm shift that hazing, bullying, sexual harassment should not be and cannot be tolerated. So it's definitely an important move in the right direction. Then at the legal committee in April, attended that meeting, and several seafarer related issues, probably two of the most impactful was one, they agreed to create a task force to look at the joint ILO and IMO abandonment database. The reason it's important is, if you can follow this issue at all, everybody's pointing out the number of abandonments, and they've been going up year over year. But one of the challenges, people have been challenging, questioning the accuracy of this database. And if we use this database for trends and looking at causation, looking at ways to hopefully reduce the likelihood of abandonments, it's important that this data have a degree of reliability, that everybody's confident it accurately reflects what's going on, and that's the goal of this task force. It's jointly hosted by the ICS and ITF, so both of the social partners are engaged in this task force and each recognize the importance of getting it right. So that was a key work that came out of it. And then the other was that the legal committee for the past 2 years had to work on this fair treatment of seafarers accused of crimes. And what are we talking about? Originally the term was accused of maritime crimes, and no one knew what that meant, so hopefully they did away with the maritime piece, said crimes. But really what they're trying to get at is, not trying to get at really a seafarer is picked up for shoplifting. What they're really trying to get at, the issue they're trying to fix is, think seafarers on a ship just doing their job, no intentional criminal act, but they might be involved in maritime accidents, some oil spill, or there are drugs found hidden in a container that there's no evidence any of the mariners had any knowledge of on there. And yet seafarers end up being detained and incarcerated, sometimes for extended periods of time without charges, without court hearing, and often without what we consider fundamental due process rights. They just don't have them. And that's what this legal committee was trying to respond to over the last 2 years, and I participated in the work group both years on that. And then now forwarded the draft guidelines. Again, the guidelines, key is they're not mandatory, but it's a good start, the guidelines. They now forward that to the joint tripartite work group this meeting in November to look at them, revise them, and hopefully approve them. And if they do, they'll send them back to the IMO, and hopefully the IMO will then approve those guidelines and become in force. For those that are aware, this recently similar process went around for guidelines to deal with abandoned seafarers. Same type of process, starting the IMO, went to the joint tripartite work group, they worked on it, revised, sent back to the IMO, they've been approved. So the guidelines are now in existence. If you're not aware of that, or what they are, you can find them by Google, or you get my card, I'd be happy to email them to you. And the guidelines on how to mitigate the impact, hopefully prevent abandonment, and if they do, how to mitigate them from occurring. And then the last thing I just want to mention is the special project committee meeting that is coming up. The Beach mentioned that next year. There's those two amendments that definitely carried forward from the last one. Both really flowed from the challenge of COVID. One is the maximum duration on board the vessel. I think most people here are aware that the crew change crisis made that really hard. And man, it's stuck in ships for a long time. The reason the issue was hard is that, the ship owners, I think, rightly point to the fact that it's not that they didn't want to do crew changes. A lot of times it was very, very difficult and nearly impossible because a lot of countries that seafarers could fly through, they couldn't fly through during the COVID pandemic. And so I think ship owners' concern was, if you put a strict, hard standard on our ships are detained because we can't do crew change crisis, that didn't seem fair. So that's why that was a hard issue to resolve. But it was important enough that it didn't get defeated, it got carried forward for discussion at the next SDC. And the other one with where to repatriate, this was not typically an issue in the past. The question is a ship responsible to repatriate to the home country or to their home? Historically, not a big deal. Though during the COVID pandemic, it became a big deal, because as some of you might recall, a lot of countries require that once somebody came into the country for the first time, there's a period of mandatory quarantine, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, etc. Who bears that burden? If a ship responsibility is just to repatriate them to the country, as soon as set foot in the home country, they're done. If the burden is to repatriate them to the home, then the ship owner is likely responsible to pay for their hotel lodging for 2-3 weeks, pay for their subsistence meal stuff, maybe pay their wages until you get back to the home. So that became an issue of contention and discussion. And then, as we mentioned a couple of times, what ICMA has recognized as a concern that we want to bring to everyone's attention is shore leave. For as long as seafarers have been going to sea, you can go back to the days of wooden ships or sail or beyond that. The high point of morale, when you pull the port, we'll be able to get shore leave, go ashore and see the town. For those who don't know, the early part of my career was in the Coast Guard, and I started my career on cutters sailing around. And we didn't go to sea for as long as these seafarers do. But I can speak to myself that going to port and getting to go ashore was always a highlight. And now, all too often, the seafarers are in port, have been at sea for an extended period of time, and for one reason or another, cannot obtain shore leave. And as I mentioned, there is in fact a regulation about shore leave, but just doesn't have a whole lot of details as to additional standards or guidelines on how to implement that shore leave, and as a result, a lot of seafarers are not going to access shore leave. So it was proposed these amendments for the ship owners to consider, for the seafarers representatives to consider in some countries, and hopefully one or more of them propose that we can improve the standards around shore leave and hopefully get more seafarers ashore.